ePower Resources, trading on the CSE with the symbol EPR, has made it its mission to discover and delineate economic graphite deposits in a safe, mining-friendly jurisdiction. Here with us today is James Cross, CEO of the company, to tell us more. Welcome, James.
Yeah, thanks, Björn, and good to be here.
Great having you. So, James, before we start talking about the company directly, please explain to our audience the case for graphite and especially graphite in Quebec, perhaps.
Yes, well, the way we got into graphite was back in late 2018. Some of our investors asked, what could we do in the resources space around electric vehicle batteries? So what we did was set about looking at which material components of electric vehicle batteries would be likely to run into a supply crisis soonest, if any of them would be. And the conclusion we came to back then was it would be graphite. I mean, it's much more about, it's about much more than electric vehicles today. But back then, we saw all this manufacturing capacity of electric vehicle batteries being erected in basically the Western world, but no thought appeared to be given to where are they going to get the graphite. And graphite is the single largest material component of a lithium ion battery and forms nearly the entire anode side of the battery. You know, there's the anode side and the cathode side. The cathode side is the metals. There's the lithium in between, and then the anode side is virtually all graphite. And sometimes in the cathode side, the metals will change, meaning, somebody's using manganese, but another company isn't using manganese. But on the anode side, it never changes. It's always graphite and always really has been. There is no substitute. Without graphite, you don't have a lithium ion battery. So we got into it for that reason. And the plan was really to delineate and develop graphite resources in the ground and monetize them by selling them to a manufacturer who's already invested billions and billions of dollars in manufacturing capacity and desperately needs, therefore, a graphite deposit. And you don't see mining companies getting into graphite nowadays, really. There are a few Canadian juniors and a few Australian juniors, but you don't hear about BHP or Rio Tinto or Barrick doing anything around graphite. North America specifically, there really hasn't been any really significant investment in graphite for 70 years or something like that. So, this is something we were talking about as coming back in 2019 and 2020, but now it's here. It's not just about EVs anymore. It's also about defense and industrial self-sufficiency. As manufacturing looks for resources much closer to home and doesn't want to depend on something that might be to them politically unreliable, or a supply source that is politically unreliable. And
Which,
graphite,
let's not talk about it, is China, because there's 85
yeah,
or something percent of the spherical graphite, at least. I'm not sure about the natural graphite, is coming out of China
yeah.
nowadays. So that's where you want to be situated, rather in Quebec than anywhere else. So tell us a bit more about I think in your presentation, you call it the Quebec advantage. I guess there's a lot of
Mhm.
mining companies there, and it's a pretty mining-friendly jurisdiction, right?
Yes, I mean, historically, Quebec was a graphite producer. In a different part of Quebec, in the early part of the last century, there were quite a lot of small graphite mines, and it was a graphite producing region. There are a few Canadian juniors in Quebec, not as many as there were a few years ago, but there are a few. And Quebec, it's very well positioned geographically, being in the northeastern part of North America. It's only like a 1 week sailing time from Hamburg, Germany. So it's close to European manufacturing, and also it has barge access to the interior of North America through the Great Lakes, and ocean going access through the port, and as well as ground transport links to the rest of. And the Quebec advantage, starts there. The geographic positioning of Quebec. Quebec is also traditionally very supportive of exploration. In the part of Quebec where we operate, they call it the Plan Nord region, really a plan to extend Quebec's infrastructure further north.
Okay.
And they often extend the infrastructure before any people actually live there. So we have the benefit of being about, 3 hours from Baie-Comeau, Quebec, which is a port on the mouth of the St. Lawrence River.
Hmm.
And it has road access to the rest of the continent. And we drive to our property from Baie-Comeau almost entirely on a major highway. Only the last 60 kilometers are on what they call class one logging roads, which are engineered roads, not paved, but engineered to handle big logging trucks. It's very easy to reach the property. And Quebec also supports financially the story around electric vehicle batteries, and exploration in general. So if we deploy capital in the Plan Nord region where we operate into the ground on qualifying geological expenses, Quebec sends us 35% of that money back several months later. And we've never failed to claim a dollar or never failed to receive a dollar we've claimed. So the program actually works. When you hear you're going to get money from the government, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll believe it when I see it, but it works. They're also supportive of the battery industry. Thus far, most of their grants have been further downstream in the supply chain, like through manufacturing. But they are beginning to make grants on the exploration side. We're expecting to see that open up more in the very near future.
Okay, well, thank you. That's good to know. So a lot of background there that our viewers can use. Now we're narrowing it down. We were graphite in general, Quebec. Before we come to the project, though, let's talk about the district that's also called Tetepiska, I think is it's
Yes,
pronounced.
that's
Tell us a bit
right.
about that
And
district.
yeah, the district is the highest grade known graphite district in all North America. It's only been discovered about 25 years ago. In graphite, a typical graphite mine will produce at a grade of somewhere between 2% and 7% graphite. However, the average resource grade in this district is 14%. So it is quite high grade when compared to many other districts. And it's, as we mentioned before, easily accessed geographically, by through transport links. It's
Yeah.
got all that going for and we sit directly next to or adjacent to what is, in my view, the best known graphite deposit in North America. It's the Uatnon deposit, which is held by Nouveau Monde Graphite, who recently secured major investments from simultaneously General Motors, Panasonic, and Mitsui. So they are essentially controlled by those industrial players. They're not fully owned by those industrial players, but they own a very large part of the company and therefore have some control. And Nouveau Monde has two of the only 10 projects that are big enough to make an impact on the supply deficit looming.
Okay.
So that's two off the table. There are eight left, including our Tetepisca property.
Okay, well then let's talk about that then. You also already told us that it's easy to access, right? Okay, you can drive onto the property, but
Yep.
how far do you have to drive? What's like the nearest community? What apart from the roads is the infrastructure available?
The nearest town of any significance is Baie-Comeau,
Mhm.
which is a port, and it's also home to the largest grain elevator in the eastern half of North America, owned by Cargill. So it's the point at which barge traffic from the interior of North America drops things off at the port where ocean-going vessels pick it up and bring it to the rest of the world. So in that way, it's perfectly positioned for maritime access and has road links to the rest of the continent. So you can wake up in a hotel in Baie-Comeau, have breakfast, and by lunchtime you're on the property in a pickup truck. It's that easy, really. And oddly enough, there's nearby even a hotel where you can stay, even though nobody lives anywhere near there. There is a hotel which is designed for accommodating the forestry business, the mining and exploration business, and hydroelectric power. There's a lot of that up there.
Okay, so that's good to know that you can stay there and can access the property relatively easily. Let's start about what you have done there then so far. I think we should perhaps start with the southern portion of the Tetepiska project, because I think that's the most advanced, right? It's the more advanced, let's say.
It is. We picked it up sooner. We acquired it sooner. Also, yeah, have done more work down there. We did our first work in the northern part just this past field season. So, that was the original property we picked up. We were looking for a graphite property and were introduced to some local prospectors who had a small property, which is now part of what is Tetepiska. And this is back in early 2019 when nobody cared about graphite. We were able to acquire it for really very little money and some shares. And back then, our company didn't really have much in it. There was really not much of a story yet behind it. It was just an idea. We were able to pick that up and then add to it through staking, actually. We watched a few companies, allow their land packages to lapse very often for financial reasons. And we're able to build really the largest single land package in the highest grade district in all North America. So, and now down south, we also acquired a lot of historical work in Quebec. Whenever you do work on a property, the results of the work get entered into a database that anyone can access. When we picked it up, a lot of work was already done. And there are even situations where companies were hoping to find something else underground, but instead found graphite and said, well, it's just graphite. Let's walk away. Things are different now. This is a land package we'd never be able to put together today without buying it for lots of money. But we acquired it for very little. We've done one drill program on it, which only had 24 holes and had some fantastic results. We're getting the drill program. I think the highest grades were 26% or something like that, graphite. And there are a number of surface showings on the property, basically scrape the overburden away. You can kick the graphite on the ground. Any resources we're developing are really resources found at surface.
Okay.
And we're only looking for graphite really from 0 to 100 meters. And we're coming across plenty of surface targets, along with the geophysical signature we're looking for. We like high conductivity, and that's one of the characteristics of graphite, low magnetics, which means lower sulfides than normal. Another variable in graphite is flake size. It's better to delineate a resource with bigger flake size because it commands a higher market price. And so because everything's at surface, or at least all the targets we're working on are at surface, we can look at the flake size and you can see it with the naked eye and know, all right, this is a place we want to delineate a from surface resource, and you can dismiss a few like that as well.
Okay, but if I remember correctly, you not only did a drill program, I think that was back in 23 already, the drilling, or was it in
It
24?
was, yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but this year you also took some bulk samples, right? Did
Yeah.
you get the results or the final results back from that, or how did
No,
that
not
go?
yet. Actually, that's being worked on right now.
Okay.
And so from that, we'll get flake size distributions, which means, when you pick up some, graphitic ore and look at the graphite, how much is very large flake, how much is jumbo, how much is middle and fine flake. And then you can use that to put a dollar value really on the type of rock you're looking at that surface target. So also when we can talk to manufacturers and find out what they're looking for, that tells us where to delineate a resource from surface, whether it's an in-house calculation or 43101 calculation.
43-101 being the Canadian standard that you have to adhere to for official resources, just for our viewers there. Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. So that's the south. So you get those results back hopefully soon. That would make for hopefully nice news item right there. As you said, you already started work, or you did some work just recently last year, I guess, on northern areas. And I think it
Yes.
was just a couple of days ago that you released some interesting grab sample results, I think it was.
The way we prospect the property is, we have there are extensive geophysics done on the property, so we know where there's high conductivity in the ground, and very often that means graphite. And so we can look at the map and say, okay, let's walk across this known conductive structure and look for places where the graphite either already protrudes the surface or with a detection device, they call it a beep mat. It's a like a small sled that a man carries and it runs across the ground and it will beep if you're getting that conductivity within a meter of the surface. So what we do is walk where we know there's conductivity in the ground
Hmm.
and then scrape when we get that beep from the beep mat, scrape away the overburden, which might be 50 centimeters or something like that. And then, very often you'll see graphitic rock
Okay.
and take a sample like that. And that's the grab sample. So those numbers you're looking at were obtained that way.
Because so that was, I think, up to 28, 20, almost 29%.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
is that comparable to the grades you're getting elsewhere in the district, in the Tetepiska district, or is that higher or lower? Or?
Yeah, you do see, I'd say similar, 28 or 29 is quite high. But you do see that around Tetepisca, some places with some very high grades like that. And sometimes high grades are associated with low or fine flake size,
Mm,
so the super high grades. In Tetepisca, you have that unique combination where you can often have grades in the teens and it's still good flake graphite and or a good portion of it is good flake graphite. I would say those numbers are comparable. That those particular numbers in the 20s are really good. What it did that the prospecting in the northern end gave us 5 target areas from surface where in our opinion, it's quite easy to delineate a from surface resource. Because you can again, you just scour the ground and you see the graphitic rock. So you know exactly where to put holes. And and it's not just based on a line of sight. It gave us those 5 target areas, which are very close. And the closest one is 4.5 kilometers to the proposed open pit at Uatnon, which again is, in my view, the best graphite or known graphite deposit in all North America. We could, you could almost throw a stone from
well,
these target
in these
areas.
kind of terms, 4.5 kilometers basically adjacent, right, really. So,
Yeah, that's right. And
yeah.
our property, joins theirs. Yeah, it's very close. The geology is really all the same. We're getting those signatures on the ground. Yeah, we believe it's quite easy to delineate one or even more from surface resources on the ground. And that most recent newly discovered target area that we put out in a press release last week, um, that's the closest one to the pit or the proposed pit for Huatnon, just 4.5 Ks. And but there are several others as well. So the northern area turned out to be a lot better than we expected. It was for the most part unexplored before. We had the geophysics, which were done by other companies many years ago, and or the airborne survey, and did the groundwork ourselves, and came up with some really good results.
So what now then? What's the plan for the rest of 2025? First quarter's almost over. Let's say to the end of the
Yep.
year or same time next year. Where do you like to be with the company then?
Yeah, well, we should have the results back by late April on the
Like,
the samples taken during the previous field season.
mhm.
And that will enable us to put on several of the target areas an estimated dollar amount of the rock or dollar value of the rock there. That'll help us prioritize from surface targets. And then if we're able to have a robust field season, because we raise a lot of capital, we would go out and delineate at least one 43101 resource there. Now, our shares are only at 5 or 6 cents now. So we don't want to do a tremendous amount of work unless we're able to raise money at higher prices. And the reason for that is, I mentioned this earlier, there are only 10 notable graphite projects in North America that can make any type of impact on the deficit looming. The continent probably needs 40 of those properties, and there are only 10. Now, 2 are already gone. General Motors, Panasonic, and Mitsui have control of those. So there are 8 left. The whole graphite world knows which 8 those are. We don't really have to put too much more lipstick on it to show that it's one of those. It's if we can raise capital at high equity prices and dilute less, we'll fast track the work and delineate resources. But if we can't raise much money or at high price or can't raise at high prices, we'll do a much more modest field season to avoid dilution. We'll advance the project, but not get crazy because, in our view, we don't really have to.
It's about once you have the results from the bark sample back, that should at least, as you said, give you the ability to put some sort of price or worth on what you have taken those from, and that might help to get the share price up a bit and then free up more capital. We'll see how it goes. It's very interesting indeed. Yeah. You hear all about Tesla cars not selling that well at the moment, but I think overall worldwide e-mobility, the sales of EVs are up 20% or have been for the last year. So that's one big part of the market, not the only one, as you said. Will be very interesting to see how that goes, and we'll be sure to check in at a later time to hear more. Thank you.
Thanks, Björn, and thanks everybody for watching.
Perfect. Thank you very much.